Julia Morgan had perfected the art of blending in at Westridge Mall. At 32, her brunette hair stayed pulled back in the same casual ponytail she'd worn for 7 years, a habit from days when distinctive hairstyles could compromise operational security in hostile territory. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her hazel eyes, once sharp as tactical scopes, now avoided. Prolonged contact with strangers, scanning surroundings with practiced nonchalance as she shopped for basic necessities. The mall bustled with weekend activity as she arrived at 10 a.m., her comfortable sneakers moving silently across polished floors that had witnessed decades of suburban commerce. The other shoppers called her the ghost behind her back, a reference to how she seemed to materialize and vanish without warning, and her uncanny ability to navigate crowded spaces without bumping into anyone. What they didn't know was that Julia Morgan had once been Captain Julia Ramirez, the first woman to complete Delta Force selection and assessment, leading America's most elite special operators on missions that never officially happened. 8 years ago, she commanded a 12-person team during Operation Phantom Shield, guiding America's most specialized warriors into what should have been a precision hostage rescue. Instead, it became the nightmare that ended her career and began her exile. The betrayal had come from Major Richard Blackwood, her handler and commanding officer. Intelligence sold to foreign operatives. Mission parameters leaked to hostile forces. 3 operators dead in an ambush that never should have happened. When the smoke cleared and the investigations began, falsified evidence painted Julia as the reckless commander who'd ignored protocols and led her team into an obvious trap. The military inquiry had been swift and merciless. Captain Julia Ramirez was stripped of her rank, her operational status, her identity. Only Colonel Sarah Winters, her former selection instructor, believed her innocence. But her reassignment to Pacific Command came days before she could advocate through proper channels. Blackwood's network of corrupt officials buried the truth beneath mountains of manufactured evidence. Now 7 years later, Julia existed in the shadows of her former life. Every mundane shopping trip, every ordinary interaction was both torture and salvation, close enough to normal civilian life, while forever carrying the weight of her fallen teammates. She'd legally changed her name, altered her appearance, and disappeared into suburban anonymity, where her true identity remained hidden. The small apartment that served as her residence sat in the quiet section of Westridge Heights, tucked between a community park and modest family homes. Inside, beneath a simple bookcase, lay a small fireproof safe containing 3 items: a worn unit patch with black borders, a photograph of a young captain with her team before deployment, and a handwritten note from Sergeant Eric Daniels, one of the operators who died under her command, written just hours before the mission that killed him. "Captain," the note read in Eric's precise handwriting, "whatever happens out there, I want you to know we trust you completely. You're the best operator any of us have ever worked with. See you on the other side. Daniels." Every morning at 5:30, Julia ran 8 miles in darkness, her feet finding the same route they'd traced for 7 years. The physical exertion helped drown out the emotional burden, the constant reminder of 3 lives lost and a truth buried beneath layers of corruption and lies. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As she browsed kitchen appliances at the department store, retail associate Mark Peterson approached with his usual helpful demeanor. Peterson was one of the few people at the mall who engaged with her as more than just another customer, though he had no idea why she seemed to possess such situational awareness, or why her eyes constantly scanned exit points. "Miss Morgan, good to see you again," Peterson said with genuine warmth. "That blender you were looking at last week just went on sale. 30% off through Sunday. Julia's hands stilled on the coffee maker she'd been examining. The discount would help her tight budget, a far cry from the days when government resources supplied everything she needed. She'd studied consumer reports on kitchen appliances, memorized specifications, and calculated cost-benefit ratios with the same precision she once applied to mission planning. "Thanks for the heads-up," she replied, keeping her voice casual. Despite appreciating his thoughtfulness, working part-time as a personal trainer at a local gym covered her basic expenses, but luxuries remained rare. Peterson studied her with curiosity. "You seem pretty knowledgeable about product specifications." "Most customers just look at the price tag and the color." "I like to research before purchasing," Julia said simply, returning to her examination. Never know when the knowledge might come in handy. What she didn't mention was that she'd spent countless off-duty hours developing expertise in civilian skills, drawn to mastering new abilities like a moth to flame. In her dreams, she still operated not on suburban streets and shopping centers, but in hostile territories and crisis zones that demanded peak performance. As Peterson walked away to help another customer, Julia allowed herself a moment of reflection. For 7 years, she'd watched from the sidelines as others lived normal lives uncomplicated by classified operations or betrayal. She'd constructed a careful facade of normalcy while maintaining the hypervigilance that had once kept her alive in combat zones. She had no idea that this ordinary shopping trip would become the catalyst for a confrontation that would shatter her carefully constructed anonymity and force her to choose between the safety of shadows and the dangerous light of her true capabilities. The first warning signs were already manifesting, though she wouldn't recognize them for another hour. 3 young men near the mall's east entrance had been watching shoppers with predatory intent, their casual observation belying the coordination of experienced criminals. Their subtle communication and strategic positioning around exit points would have seemed unremarkable to most civilians, but to Julia's trained eye, they represented a tactical formation with clear intent. As Julia secured her purchases and prepared for the walk to her car in the outer parking area, she had no idea that her past was about to collide with her present in the most public way possible. The ghost of Westridge Mall was about to discover that some training never fades, no matter how deeply buried. First contact with danger. The food court bustled with Saturday afternoon energy as families, teenagers, and weary shoppers refueled. Between purchasing expeditions, Julia sat in the far corner, her back to the wall, with clear sight lines to 3 separate exits, a habit so ingrained she no longer recognized it as tactical positioning. She methodically ate her salad while mentally reviewing her remaining errands, calculating optimal routes through the mall to minimize exposure time in crowded areas. 7 years of civilian life hadn't diminished her instinctive threat assessment or situational awareness. The first indication of trouble came when she noticed the 3 young men from the east entrance, now positioned near the food court's main exit. Their casual demeanor didn't match their alert eyes and deliberate movements. One spoke quietly into a cell phone while maintaining visual contact with the southern corridor, a classic surveillance technique Julia recognized from countless operations. Without changing her expression or eating pace, she expanded her observation sphere, identifying 2 more individuals with similar behavioral patterns near the escalators. 5 potential hostiles coordinating movements within a civilian environment. Suggested organized criminal activity beyond simple shoplifting or opportunistic theft. Julia continued eating while mentally mapping primary and secondary exit routes, identifying potential improvised weapons, and cataloging civilians who might become collateral damage if the situation escalated. These automatic assessments occurred without conscious effort, her mind processing threat variables with machine-like efficiency. As she disposed of her meal container, Julia noticed the systematic way the men's attention tracked specific shoppers, particularly women with expensive bags or jewelry. Their focus suggested they were selecting targets for theft, possibly with confrontation planned in the parking areas where security cameras had limited coverage. Making her way toward the department store where her remaining purchases awaited, Julia maintained awareness of the group's movements without obvious attention. They hadn't marked her as anything other than another shopper, her deliberately unremarkable appearance and average-priced clothing providing the anonymity she'd cultivated for years. When she entered the kitchenware section, Peterson greeted her with friendly professionalism. "Ms. Morgan, I've got that blender ready at the register whenever you're finished shopping." "Thanks," she replied with a polite nod. "Just looking at measuring cups, then I'll be done." As she selected her final items, Julia's peripheral vision caught one of the men from the food court entering the department store, his casual browsing contradicted by his systematic scanning of shoppers and exits. The tactical precision of his movement set off warning signals honed through years of counter-terrorism operations. At the register, Peterson chatted amiably while processing her purchase. "Planning some serious cooking this weekend?" "Just replacing worn-out equipment," Julia answered. Her attention split between the conversation and monitoring the man now positioning himself near jewelry displays with sightlines to the register area. "Well, that blender has a 5-year warranty," Peterson continued. "But the way you research things, I'm sure you already knew that." Julia smiled politely while completing her transaction, hyper-aware of 2 more members of the group, now visible through the store's entrance, their coordinated positioning suggesting they were establishing a perimeter. Their attention wasn't directed at her specifically, but their tactical formation indicated preparation for some kind of operation. As she left the department store with her purchases, Julia noted how the men's communications pattern changed. Subtle nods, strategic repositioning, the classic signs of a team preparing to execute. Their target appeared to be an elderly woman with expensive jewelry who was walking slowly toward the east exit where the parking garage connected to the mall. Julia adjusted her route to maintain observation capabilities without revealing her interest. The men were clearly coordinating to intercept the woman in the transitional space between mall security coverage and the parking structure, vulnerability gap Julia herself had identified years ago during her first visit to this mall. The elderly woman moved with the unhurried pace of someone unaware they were being stalked. Julia quickened her steps slightly, timing her approach to reach the exit corridor just as the woman entered it. The tactical part of her mind calculated risk variables and response options automatically, weighing civilian safety against exposure concerns. As the woman approached the exit, 2 of the men moved to flanking positions while a third prepared to approach from behind, a classic ambush formation that Julia had both employed and countered in operations across 3 continents. Their coordination suggested professional training, not opportunistic criminals. Julia made her decision in microseconds, years of operational decision-making condensed into a moment of crystal clarity. She would intercept the developing situation before the woman became a victim, using minimum force to disrupt their plan without revealing her full capabilities. A simple intervention that could be explained as good timing rather than tactical expertise. As she prepared to implement this limited response plan, a mall security guard's radio crackled nearby, momentarily distracting the would-be attackers. They hesitated, reassessing risk factors with the unexpected security presence. Julia watched as they executed a textbook abort procedure, dispersing with practiced casualness that confirmed her suspicions about their level of organization. The elderly woman continued toward her car, completely unaware of the danger she'd narrowly avoided. The men regrouped near the food court, their body language suggesting they were selecting an alternate target rather than abandoning their operation. Julia recognized the determination in their postures. They would attempt another intercept, possibly with a different victim. She considered alerting security, but immediately recognized the limitations of that approach. The men would deny everything. Security would find no evidence of attempted crime, and Julia would draw unwanted attention to herself. Instead, she continued her shopping while maintaining awareness of their movements, documenting faces and behavioral patterns that might become relevant later. By mid-afternoon, Julia had completed her planned purchases and prepared to exit the mall. The criminal group had maintained surveillance operations throughout the shopping center, their coordination suggesting they were waiting for specific vulnerability conditions before striking. Their patience indicated professional methodology, beyond typical mall theft operations. As Julia approached her vehicle in the parking structure's third level, she noticed how the lighting in this section had deteriorated since her last visit, creating shadows and blind spots that would advantage attackers. She walked with purpose, keys positioned between her fingers in the casual defensive posture adopted by women everywhere, her packages arranged to allow immediate dropping if movement became necessary. She had nearly reached her car when instinct alerted her to approaching footsteps from multiple directions, too coordinated to be coincidental, too measured to be innocent. The tactical part of her mind activated instantly, processing environmental factors, threat assessment, and response options with the efficiency that had once made her Delta Force's most effective close-quarters combat specialist. Julia Morgan had spent 7 years hiding in plain sight, suppressing the capabilities that had defined her former existence. But as the footsteps closed in from 3 directions, she realized that some ghosts refused to stay buried. The decision point had arrived sooner than expected. Continue the charade of normalcy or acknowledge the operator that still lived within her muscle memory and tactical instincts. As she placed her packages in the trunk, giving herself precious seconds to evaluate options, Julia understood that the confrontation now developing would test whether Captain Julia Ramirez had truly disappeared, or had simply been waiting for the moment when her skills would again become necessary. The mall's concrete parking structure was about to witness a demonstration of capabilities that most civilians didn't know existed. The escalation matrix had been activated, and Julia found herself moving through the familiar mental checklist that had preceded hundreds of operations in her former life. Threat identification, environmental assessment, civilian safety parameters, proportional response planning, the tactical algorithm executed with unconscious precision as she closed her trunk and turned to face whatever came next. The confrontation begins. The footsteps circled Julia's position with practiced precision, 3 men moving with the coordinated rhythm of predators who'd done this before. The parking structure's poor lighting created shadow zones they exploited effectively, approaching from angles that would have trapped most victims against their vehicle. "Hey lady, need help with those packages?" The voice came from her left, casual in tone, but positioned to block her driver's side door. Julia maintained her civilian posture, while her mind rapidly categorized threats. The speaker, mid-20s, approximately 185 pounds, right-handed stance, possible blade concealed at waistband. Second man, heavier build, moving to cut off retreat path, tactical positioning suggesting previous training. Third man, slender, nervously shifting weight, likely armed based on unnatural jacket positioning. "I'm fine, thank you," she responded, voice calibrated to convey polite dismissal rather than fear or confrontation. Her keys remained positioned between her knuckles, the universal women's defense posture that would appear normal to observers, while providing minimal protection. "Actually, I think you're going to help us," the first man said, dropping the friendly pretense as the 3 closed their perimeter. "Nice watch, designer purse. Those don't come cheap on a regular salary." Julia assessed options with cold efficiency. Standard civilian response: surrender valuables to minimize physical harm. Tactical response: neutralize threats using available environmental advantages. The balance hinged on maintaining her cover versus ensuring personal safety. "Take the purse and watch," she said, adopting the slight tremor civilians display under threat. My wallet's in the front pocket. Just let me go. The staged fear bought precious seconds while she mapped the concrete support pillar 2 meters to her right, the overhead pipe junction that could serve as a grapple point, and the maintenance door 18 meters behind her. The leader smiled, revealing the true nature of their intentions. We're going to take everything, sweetheart. But first, we're all going to take a little walk to that stairwell. No cameras there. We can get better acquainted. The implication crystallized the threat matrix. This wasn't simple robbery. Their coordinated approach and isolation tactics indicated predatory intent beyond theft. The escalation shifted Julia's decision parameters instantly. Please, she continued the frightened act while subtly adjusting her stance, transferring weight to her back foot. I have children waiting at home. They'll wait a little longer. The heavy-set man laughed, reaching for her arm with meaty fingers. His hand never made contact. Julia's movement registered to human perception as a startled flinch, a normal reaction from a frightened woman. What actually occurred was a precisely calculated weight transfer that pivoted her body 6 inches laterally, causing his grasping hand to miss by millimeters. Don't make this difficult, the leader snapped, frustration edging his voice as he advanced. Nobody's coming to help you. Julia maintained her frightened expression while her mind executed complex tactical calculations. 3 attackers, enclosed space, civilian protocols, exposure risk. The decision matrix resolved in microseconds. Okay, she whispered, seemingly defeated. Please don't hurt me. The leader smirked, interpreting her compliance as submission rather than strategic positioning. As he reached for her arm, Julia executed the first move in a sequence that would forever change her carefully constructed anonymity. Her purse dropped, creating momentary distraction as she pivoted 90 degrees, transferring energy through her hip rotation into a precision strike. Her elbow connected with the leader's solar plexus, not with maximum force that would cause permanent damage, but with calculated impact to disable temporarily, without evidence of trained technique. The heavy-set man lunged forward, telegraphing his movement with the predictability of someone who relied on size rather than skill. Julia utilized his momentum, redirecting his mass with an angled forearm that appeared to observers as defensive, flailing rather than the precisely executed leverage technique it actually was. He stumbled into the vehicle's hood, momentarily disoriented as Julia created distance with measured steps that positioned the third attacker in the leader's path, disrupting their coordinated advantage. Help! She called out, not because she needed assistance, but because established civilian protocols dictated creating audible alert in threatening situations. The call maintained her cover while potentially drawing witnesses. The third man pulled a knife from his jacket, confirming Julia's earlier assessment. Shut up, he hissed, brandishing the blade with the awkward grip of someone who threatened often, but employed the weapon rarely. 7 years of suppressed training crystallized in that moment. Julia registered blade length, grip type, and attacker stance simultaneously. The threat calibration crossed threshold parameters that justified proportional response escalation. What followed appeared to security cameras as desperate defensive movements from a frightened woman. What actually occurred was a textbook close-quarters neutralization executed with precision born from thousands of training repetitions. Julia's hand deflected the knife thrust along predictable vector paths, creating the angular momentum that compromised the attacker's balance. Her countermove targeted the ulnar nerve rather than bone structure, causing temporary motor dysfunction without evidence of trained technique. The knife clattered to the concrete as the man yelped in pain and confusion, unable to maintain grip strength through neurological disruption. Julia's follow-through appeared as stumbling movement while actually positioning her equidistant from all 3 attackers, maintaining tactical advantage. The leader, recovering from the initial strike, reassessed the situation with dawning confusion. What had seemed easy prey now presented unexpected resistance. His tactical approach shifted from confidence to uncertainty, the psychological advantage transferring to Julia without his conscious awareness. "You bitch!" he snarled, reaching toward his waistband where Julia had already identified a probable weapon. "You're going to regret that." Before his hand reached the concealed firearm, Julia executed a sequential response that civilian observers would later describe as lucky moves and adrenaline strength. The reality was a precisely calibrated neutralization sequence designed to disable without revealing specialized training. Her palm strike to his descending arm appeared desperate, but contacted the brachial plexus with anatomical precision, causing temporary neural disruption that prevented weapon retrieval. Her follow-through movement seemed like stumbling momentum, but actually positioned her body for the decisive sequence. The heavy-set man charged again, telegraphing his attack with ponderous predictability. Julia utilized environmental features, backing against the concrete support column that appeared to observers as retreat, but actually provided the leverage point for her counter. As he reached her position, Julia executed a redirection technique disguised as defensive pushing, transferring his momentum into the column with controlled impact. The collision disoriented him long enough for her to create separation. All three attackers now faced unexpected resistance that disrupted their practiced methodology. The leader, recognizing deteriorating tactical advantage, escalated to deadly force, drawing his firearm with practiced motion that confirmed previous weapons handling. The sight of the gun triggered immediate protocol shift in Julia's response. Matrix. Deadly force authorization activated without conscious decision, muscle memory from hundreds of similar scenarios taking command. Her movement appeared to onlookers as terrified scrambling. The tactical reality was precisely executed close quarters. Firearms defense, her hands intercepting the weapon along predictable presentation paths, redirecting barrel orientation while simultaneously compromising the attacker's structural stability. The firearm discharged once into the concrete floor, the sound echoing through the parking structure as Julia executed the disarm sequence with fluid efficiency. The weapon came free in her hand as she continued movement that appeared chaotic, but actually maintained maximum tactical advantage. The three attackers, now facing armed resistance, recalculated their risk assessment. The leader, disarmed and vulnerable, backed away with the universal posture of surrender. "Hey, we were just messing around," he stammered, confidence evaporated. "Take it easy with that thing." Julia maintained the firearm in low-ready position, disguising professional grip with deliberate awkwardness. "Stay back," she warned, voice calibrated to convey civilian fear rather than tactical control. "Someone call security." The psychological advantage had completely reversed. The predators now registered as prey in their own threat assessment, initiating uncoordinated withdrawal that betrayed their lack of contingency planning. "Let's go," the leader barked to his companions, all three backing away with the disorganized movement of disrupted tactical formations. "Crazy bitch isn't worth it." They retreated toward the stairwell, abandoning coordination in favor of individual, escaped their practiced teamwork, dissolving under unexpected resistance. Julia maintained her position, weapon oriented downward in seemingly untrained posture, while actually maintaining maximum response capability. Once they disappeared into the stairwell, Julia immediately secured the firearm, ejecting the magazine and clearing the chamber with practiced efficiency before concealing the weapon in her shopping bag. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 40 seconds. Her tactical mind executed immediate evidence assessment, brass casing from the discharged round, security camera coverage, potential witnesses, timeline until security response. She collected the casing with practiced motion, ensuring no DNA transfer while appearing to simply retrieve dropped items. As distant shouts indicated approaching security personnel, Julia completed her cover maintenance procedures deliberately, mussing her hair, creating controlled breathing patterns that simulated civilian distress, and positioning herself against her vehicle with the universal posture of someone recovering from traumatic experience. The mall security guards arrived. 2 minutes later, finding a shaken woman who reported being attacked by 3 men who fled when she fought back and screamed for help. Her statement conveyed appropriate civilian response, while omitting tactical details that would raise questions about her capabilities. "Ma'am, you were incredibly lucky," the senior security officer said after taking her statement. "Taking on 3 armed men could have ended very differently." Julia nodded, maintaining the role of fortunate survivor rather than trained operator. "I took a self-defense class years ago," she offered as plausible explanation. "I guess some of it came back when I needed it." The explanation satisfied immediate curiosity while establishing reasonable background for her actions. The security footage would show desperate defensive movements rather than the precisely executed combat techniques they actually were. As police arrived to take official statements, Julia recognized the critical juncture she now faced. 7 years of anonymity had provided safety, but required suppressing her true capabilities. Today's incident had forced operational decisions that risked exposure. Each technique employed, each tactical assessment executed, represented potential recognition points for anyone familiar with specialized training. Officer Rebecca Chun took Julia's statement with professional thoroughness, noting details about the attackers while occasionally studying Julia with analytical interest. "Most people freeze in situations like this," Chun observed. "Your reactions were exceptional under the circumstances." Julia maintained her cover narrative. "Honestly, I don't remember much clearly. Everything happened so fast." Chun nodded, though something in her expression suggested professional skepticism. "Well, your instincts saved you today. Those men have attacked 6 other women in similar circumstances over the past month. You're the first to escape unharmed." The information recalibrated Julia's threat assessment. This hadn't been random opportunistic crime, but organized predatory behavior targeting multiple victims. Her tactical decision to engage rather than submit had potentially saved others from becoming victims, a mission parameter she hadn't consciously acknowledged but instinctively prioritized. "Will you need me to identify them if they're caught?" Julia asked, balancing civilian cooperation against exposure concerns. "We have the security footage," Chun replied, "though it's not great quality in that section of the garage. Strange how your face is never clearly visible to the cameras throughout the encounter." The observation carried subtle weight recognition of either extraordinary coincidence or deliberate positioning. Julia maintained neutral expression while noting Officer Chun's heightened awareness. The policewoman's observational skills suggested previous investigative experience or possibly specialized training herself. "Just lucky, I guess," Julia offered with appropriate civilian awkwardness. As the police completed their investigation, Julia recognized the security compromise that had occurred. Her tactical response, while justified by immediate threat parameters, had created evidence of capabilities inconsistent with her civilian cover identity. The risk assessment now extended beyond today's incident to potential recognition by individuals familiar with specialized training profiles. That evening, alone in her apartment, Julia methodically disassembled the seized firearm, confirming her initial assessment, a Glock 19, serial number filed off, aftermarket trigger, the typical profile of an illegally obtained weapon. She secured the components in a waterproof container, planning appropriate disposal that would eliminate forensic connection. Her tactical mind executed threat projection scenarios with practiced efficiency. The attackers had seen her face and witnessed capabilities that contradicted her civilian appearance. If released without charges, they represented potential recognition vectors that could compromise her identity. More concerning was Officer Chun's subtle recognition of inconsistencies in Julia's performance. The policewoman's observational accuracy suggested professional assessment capabilities beyond standard patrol officers. Whether this represented simple investigative competence or something more targeted remained an operational variable requiring further intelligence. As Julia secured her apartment with the methodical precision that had become second nature, she confronted the reality that 7 years of carefully constructed anonymity had been compromised in 40 seconds of operational necessity. The tactical decision matrix had prioritized immediate survival over long-term cover maintenance, the correct protocol given threat parameters, but with cascading consequences for her security posture. She retrieved the fireproof safe from beneath her bookcase, examining the contents with renewed purpose. The unit patch with black borders, the photograph of her team before deployment, the handwritten note from Sergeant Daniel's physical connections to an identity she had suppressed but never abandoned. For the first time in 7 years, Julia allowed herself to fully access the tactical mind that had once made her Delta Force's most effective close-quarters operator. The trained analytical processes activated with familiar clarity, assessing variables, projecting outcomes, identifying contingency requirements. The confrontation in the parking structure had forced partial emergence of capabilities she had hidden beneath civilian identity. The question now became whether limited exposure could be contained or if complete tactical reactivation was necessary to address emerging threats. As she replaced the safe in its concealment location, Julia's decision crystallized with operational clarity. The mall incident had created compromise vectors that required active management rather than passive avoidance. After 7 years of reactive existence, circumstances now demanded proactive engagement with potential threats. The ghost of Westridge Mall had emerged partially from hiding today. The calculated risk assessment indicated that selective operational reactivation provided better security than continued complete suppression. Julia Morgan would maintain her civilian cover, but Captain Julia Ramirez would now execute limited tactical operations to secure her compromised position. The decision point had arrived sooner than expected, but the response protocols had never been forgotten, merely stored in operational standby. As Julia prepared for sleep, her mind executed preparation sequences for limited reactivation of capabilities that had once made her America's most effective covert operator. Tomorrow would begin active security protocols rather than passive concealment. The predators who had forced this transition had no concept of the operational capabilities they had awakened from dormancy. Julia's final thought before sleep was a tactical assessment that would have chilled those who had threatened her today. They had mistaken weather for climate, confusing momentary vulnerability with fundamental weakness. Tactical reactivation. The morning following the mall incident brought rain-steady sheets that reduced visibility and created ambient noise cover. Julia's tactical mind registered these environmental factors automatically as she executed her new security protocols. With methodical precision, her apartment had been transformed overnight. The deliberately ordinary furnishings remained, maintaining visual consistency for any observer, but the security infrastructure had been completely reconfigured. Entry points were now equipped with improvised alert systems, ordinary household items repurposed into detection mechanisms that would identify intrusion without revealing specialized preparation. The morning news carried a brief report about an attempted robbery at Westridge Mall with no mention of Julia specifically, the incident categorized as routine crime rather than the tactical confrontation it had actually been. The limited media coverage provided operational advantage, reducing exposure vectors while official investigation proceeded. Julia's physical training regimen shifted from maintenance to operational readiness. The morning run extended to 12 miles, incorporating urban terrain navigation and situational awareness exercises. Her body responded to the increased demands with muscle memory that had never truly faded, combat efficiency returning with each calculated movement. The firearm components had been securely transported to 3 separate disposal locations before dawn, the disassembled weapon impossible to reconstruct or trace. Julia had maintained strict contamination protocols throughout, ensuring no DNA transfer or evidence connection to her identity. At the kitchen table, she methodically constructed a tactical assessment matrix using ordinary notepaper that would appear to casual observers as shopping lists and reminders. The analysis identified 3 primary security concerns requiring immediate attention. First, the 3 attackers represented recognition vectors with potential for identity compromise. Their criminal background suggested limited connection to intelligence resources, but their experience with law enforcement created possible exposure through mugshot recognition or official investigation. Second, Officer Chun's observational acuity indicated either exceptional police work or specialized training that might identify inconsistencies in Julia's civilian cover. This required intelligence gathering to determine whether Chun represented standard law enforcement or something more targeted. Third, the incident's security camera footage could reveal tactical patterns recognizable to individuals with specialized training background. While the garage lighting minimized clear image capture, movement analysis could potentially identify combat methodologies specific to certain operational units. As Julia completed her assessment, her phone displayed a text message from an unknown number. Security footage shows impressive reflexes. Self-defense class must have been excellent. Coffee today? Officer Chun. The message triggered immediate security protocols. Officer Chun had accessed her contact information from police report standard procedure, but the personal outreach suggested interest beyond routine investigation. The phrasing contained subtle recognition, indicators that Julia's tactical mind flagged instantly. The decision matrix resolved quickly. Engagement under controlled conditions provided better intelligence gathering than avoidance. Meeting in public maintained operational security while enabling assessment of Chun's intentions and knowledge. Julia crafted a response calibrated to maintain civilian cover. Still pretty shaken up, but coffee sounds good. Information about those men might help me feel safer. The reply came immediately. Greenleaf Cafe, 1 p.m. More comfortable than the station for follow-up questions. The suggested location triggered tactical awareness. Greenleaf provided multiple exit options, moderate civilian presence for witness coverage, and limited surveillance capabilities. A location selection indicating security consciousness beyond standard police procedure. Julia confirmed the meeting while initiating background research on Officer Rebecca Chen. Public records revealed an exemplary 5-year service record with Westridge Police Department, previously 8 years with Chicago PD Special Operations, and before that, 4 years military service with limited publicly available details, an information gap that raised operational concerns. By noon, Julia had established 3 separate exfiltration routes from Greenleaf Cafe, positioned observation assets to identify potential surveillance, and prepared cover narratives to address likely questioning scenarios. The tactical activation felt both foreign and familiar operational protocols dormant for 7 years, now executing with increasing fluidity. The cafe's corner location provided Julia with preferred tactical positioning, back to wall, clear sightlines to all entrances, proximity to kitchen exit. She arrived 20 minutes early to secure this position and establish baseline environmental awareness before Officer Chun's arrival. When Chun entered at precisely 1 p.m., Julia's assessment activated instantly. The officer moved with the measured efficiency of someone with tactical training, her casual posture belying the controlled scanning of entrances, exits, and patron positioning. She wore civilian clothes that provided freedom of movement while concealing a probable off-duty Weapon, Ms. Morgan, Chun smiled, approaching with deliberate steps. Thank you for meeting me. Julia returned the smile with calculated warmth while evaluating Chun's movement patterns. Of course. Any updates on those men? Chun settled into the chair opposite Julia, positioning that maintained mutual visibility of the cafe's main entrance. They're in custody. Prior records for similar attacks. Your description helped identify them quickly. The conversation proceeded with surface normality, two women discussing a criminal incident over coffee. The subtext contained mutual assessment, each evaluating the other's responses and behaviors for inconsistencies or recognition points. What I find interesting, Chun said after preliminary discussion, is how you managed to disarm an experienced criminal without any apparent training. The security footage shows movements that seem instinctive. The observation carried deliberate weight, a probe designed to elicit response. Julia maintained her cover narrative while noting Chun's analytical approach. Like I told the officers yesterday, I took a self-defense workshop years ago. I don't remember specific techniques, just reacted to protect myself. Chun nodded, her expression neutral while her eyes maintained focused assessment. That workshop must have been exceptional. Most civilians freeze when facing armed attackers. You moved with remarkable efficiency. The conversation continued in this pattern, Chun offering observations that probed Julia's background while maintaining plausible investigative interest. Julia providing responses that acknowledged the observations while reinforcing her civilian cover identity. After 30 minutes, Chun shifted approach. Before joining Westridge PD, I worked specialized units in Chicago. We occasionally encountered civilians with remarkable capabilities during high-stress incidents. She paused, studying Julia's reaction. Sometimes these individuals had backgrounds that explained their performance. Military service, specialized training, professional experience. The statement hung between them, neither question nor accusation but carrying clear implication. Julia recognized the tactical inflection point. Continued denial risked appearing evasive while acknowledgement risked identity compromise. She chose measured transparency. I served 4 years in the Army before civilian life. Nothing special administrative role mostly, but basic training included some defensive techniques. The partial truth provided plausible explanation for basic capabilities while concealing her actual operational background. Chun's expression remained professionally neutral, though something in her eyes suggested recognition of the tactical communication taking place. Army experience would explain some of what I observed, Chun acknowledged, though administrative roles rarely develop the kind of situational awareness you demonstrated. Before Julia could respond, Chun's phone buzzed with incoming notification. The officer checked the screen, her expression shifting subtly before returning to professional composure. Interesting timing, Chun said, turning the phone to show Julia a department alert. The men who attacked you were just released on bail. Apparently, they have connections within the county system. The information recalibrated Julia's threat assessment instantly. Released attackers with criminal network resources represented elevated security compromise risk, particularly given their first-hand experience with her capabilities. Should I be concerned? Julia asked, maintaining civilian response patterns while her tactical mind executed threat projection scenarios. Chun's response carried weighted significance. Officially, I would say the department will increase patrols in your neighborhood as precaution. Unofficially. She paused, choosing words with evident care. People with their history don't appreciate being identified by witnesses, especially ones who demonstrated unexpected resistance. The warning contained professional courtesy beyond standard police procedure. Julia noted this deviation while considering Chun's possible motivations. Professional ethical concern, specialized background recognition, or potential recruitment assessment. I appreciate your candor, Julia replied, calibrating her response. To acknowledge the warning without revealing operational understanding. I'll be extra careful for a while. Chun studied Julia with penetrating assessment before offering what appeared to be casual advice carrying tactical implications. If you feel unsafe at your current residence, considering alternate accommodation temporarily might be prudent. Sometimes distance provides perspective. The suggestion mirrored extraction protocols Julia had employed during previous operations. Temporary relocation following compromise events to assess security implications before determining permanent positioning. The parallel increased probability that Chen possessed specialized background beyond standard police training. Their meeting concluded with exchange of contact information and Chen's assurance that she would personally monitor the case. As they parted, the officer's final comment carried dual meaning that Julia's tactical awareness registered immediately. Your situational awareness saved you yesterday, Ms. Morgan. That awareness might remain valuable in coming days. Julia maintained civilian departure protocols while processing the interaction's intelligence value. Officer Chen clearly recognized inconsistencies between Julia's performance capabilities and her cover identity. Whether this recognition extended to specific identification of her Delta Force background remained uncertain, but Chen's specialized training background appeared increasingly probable. By evening, Julia had initiated full security protocols at her apartment, removing all documentation connecting to her former identity, establishing counter-surveillance measures on approach routes, and preparing go bags for immediate extraction. If compromise indicators appeared, the tactical processor that had defined her operational career now executed continuous threat assessment. The attacker's release on bail despite significant criminal history suggested network resources potentially extending into law enforcement or judicial systems. Their likely response to identification and public failure would follow predictable criminal psychology reestablishing dominance through escalated aggression. As darkness fell, Julia positioned herself in the observation post she had established near her apartment's front window, a location providing maximum environmental awareness while minimizing exposure to external observation. The steady rain continued, providing both tactical advantage through reduced visibility and disadvantage through mask of approach sounds. The first compromise indicator appeared at 9:47 p.m., an unmarked van with tinted windows performing a slow drive-by reconnaissance of her building. The vehicle's movement pattern matched surveillance protocols rather than routine traffic, passenger windows slightly lowered despite rain to permit visual acquisition of targets. Julia documented the vehicle's details while maintaining position, recognizing the pattern as preliminary surveillance rather than immediate threat. The methodical approach suggested organized operation rather than emotional response potentially, indicating the attackers had resources beyond typical street criminals. At 11:23 p.m., perimeter sensors indicated movement in the alley behind her building, deliberate advancement with tactical positioning rather than casual passage. Julia activated counter-surveillance systems, utilizing modified household technology, to provide early warning without revealing specialized preparation. The tactical assessment indicated coordinated approach by multiple individuals with rudimentary operational planning likely, the mall attackers accompanied by additional criminal associates. Their movement pattern suggested intent to breach her apartment under cover of darkness, utilizing numerical advantage to overcome resistance. Julia initiated decisive response protocol. Rather than fortify her position and risk property damage that would require police response and official documentation, she implemented immediate extraction. The go bag containing essential identity documents and operational requirements was already prepared, exfiltration route pre-established through neighboring building. She exited through her apartment's rear emergency exit 40 seconds before the first perpetrator reached her front door, timing that appeared coincidental to observers, but represented precise tactical execution. The rain provided cover for her movement as she traversed the pre-planned route to her secondary vehicle, an unremarkable sedan registered under alternative documentation, maintained for contingency purposes. From secure observation position, Julia confirmed breach of her apartment 20 minutes. Later, 3 individuals forcing entry through front door, using basic tools and minimal skill. Their movements lacked professional discipline, confirming criminal background rather than specialized training. The tactical decision matrix resolved with operational clarity. These individuals represented security compromise requiring neutralization, but their amateur methodology provided opportunity for controlled response rather than immediate counterattack. Julia initiated surveillance of the perpetrators, documenting their activities while gathering intelligence on network connections and operational patterns. Their actions revealed disorganized search procedures, indicating generalized threat intent, rather than specific intelligence targeting criminal intimidation rather than professional manhunt. By morning, she had established comprehensive intelligence on the attackers' movements, associates, and base of operations, a long-abandoned commercial property repurposed as criminal enterprise headquarters. The surveillance revealed broader criminal network than initially assessed, with approximately 15 associates operating from central location. This expanded threat assessment activated specialized operational planning protocols Julia had executed during multiple overseas missions now applied to domestic security requirement. The criminal network's systematic targeting of women established legitimate neutralization parameters under her ethical framework protection of potential civilian victims justifying intervention. After 72 hours of continuous surveillance, Julia had compiled actionable intelligence on criminal operations, including narcotics distribution, weapons trafficking, and organized assault patterns targeting vulnerable individuals throughout Westridge. The network's operational security was minimal, their criminal methodology relying on intimidation rather than technical sophistication. On the 4th night, Julia received text message from Officer Chun, "Associates of your mall friends increasing. Community presence. Department aware but jurisdictionally limited. Stay vigilant." The communication confirmed Julia's assessment. Local law enforcement identified criminal escalation but faced procedural constraints preventing effective intervention. The message also indicated Chun maintained awareness of Julia's security situation while operating through official channels. Julia's response was calibrated to acknowledge receipt while maintaining civilian communication patterns. Thanks for the update. Taking precautions. The tactical processor that had made her Delta Force's most effective operator now executed comprehensive mission planning. The criminal network represented active threat to both her security and civilian population. Their operational patterns indicated escalating violence with limited law enforcement containment. Intervention parameters aligned with protective protocols that had defined her previous operational directives. As Julia completed preparation for targeted counter-operation, her tactical mind acknowledged the inevitable transformation occurring. 7 years of suppressing operational capabilities had provided necessary recovery and perspective, but current threat parameters required controlled reactivation of specialized skills. The ghost of Westridge Mall was transitioning from passive concealment to active intervention, not through emotional response to personal threat, but through calculated assessment of civilian protection requirements. The operational capacity that had defined Captain Julia Ramirez was re-emerging with focused purpose and refined ethical framework. The criminal network that had inadvertently triggered this reactivation had no concept of the operational response they had initiated. Their assessment of vulnerable civilian target failed to recognize the specialized training and tactical thinking concealed beneath ordinary appearance. In her temporary safe house, Julia reviewed operational parameters with methodical precision. The mission objectives crystallized with ethical clarity: neutralize immediate threats to civilian population, Provide actionable intelligence to law enforcement for network dismantling. Maintain personal security without compromising operational background. The tactical processor that had remained dormant for 7 years now executed with renewed purpose, not for governmental directive or military objective, but for protection of innocent civilians targeted by predators who believed their victims powerless. The operational irony wasn't lost on Julia. Her specialized training developed for international security now applied to community protection in suburban America. As she prepared for decisive engagement, Julia acknowledged the personal transformation occurring alongside tactical reactivation. 7 years of civilian existence had provided perspective on operational ethics and independent judgment that her previous command structure had often constrained. The skills remained unchanged, but their application would now follow personal, ethical framework rather than external directive. The ghost of Westridge Mall was assuming new identity, neither wholly the Delta Force operator she had been, nor the anonymous civilian she had pretended to be. The integration of both experiences created operational capability guided by ethical clarity and personal accountability. The transformation represented not return to previous identity, but evolution into something more balanced, specialized skills applied with civilian perspective. Tactical efficiency guided by ethical framework developed through years of reflection. The predators who had forced this reactivation would soon discover the fundamental miscalculation in their threat assessment. The decisive engagement. Raindrops traced silver paths down the abandoned warehouse windows as Julia completed her final operational preparations. The derelict industrial complex that housed the criminal network sprawled across 3 acres of forgotten urban landscape, a monument to economic collapse now repurposed for predatory enterprise. 5 nights of meticulous surveillance had provided comprehensive intelligence on network operations. 22 individuals operated under loose hierarchical structure, maintaining narcotics distribution, weapons trafficking, and organized assault operations throughout Westridge County. Their security measures were rudimentary perimeter sentries. With minimal training, basic surveillance cameras without proper coverage mapping, communication systems vulnerable to interception. Julia's tactical processor calculated mission parameters with cold precision. Primary objective: neutralize immediate threats to civilian population. Secondary objective: secure actionable intelligence for law enforcement. Operational constraints: non-lethal engagement, minimal property damage, maintain cover identity, create plausible deniability for specialized training. The rain provided optimal operational conditions, reduced visibility for approach, ambient noise masking movement. Degraded electronic surveillance effectiveness. Julia had selected engagement timing to coincide with peak operational activity, ensuring maximum target presence while criminal. Leadership conducted weekly distribution planning. At 23:45, Julia initiated approach phase. Her tactical attire balanced operational requirements against cover. Maintenance dark clothing providing minimal visibility without specialized appearance. Hardware store knee pads and gloves offering protection without military-grade signature, readily available. Ski mask concealing identity while justifying civilian explanation if compromised. The perimeter breach followed calculated risk assessment. Rather than employ specialized infiltration techniques that would indicate military training, Julia utilized environmental features and civilian-accessible methods scaling drainage pipe to rooftop access, leveraging poorly maintained security infrastructure, exploiting blind spots in camera coverage. Her movement through external security layers appeared to automated systems as environmental anomalies rather than deliberate infiltration. Precisely timed advancement between surveillance sweeps, utilization of rain shadows, and structural blind spots, patient progression that prioritized detection avoidance over speed. The warehouse interior revealed organized criminal enterprise beyond initial assessment distribution staging areas, weapons storage, falsified identification processing. Julia documented layout with methodical efficiency, constructing comprehensive intelligence package for law enforcement while establishing tactical advantage through environmental familiarization. Communication intercepts confirmed leadership meeting in progress senior network members, discussing territorial expansion and increased targeting of vulnerable populations. The intelligence validated intervention parameters under Julia's ethical framework organized predatory behavior presenting imminent threat to civilian safety. The engagement sequence executed with precision born from thousands of training repetitions. Rather than direct confrontation that would reveal specialized capabilities, Julia implemented systematic infrastructure degradation power distribution, compromised through civilian accessible methods. Communication systems disrupted via rudimentary technical means, environmental manipulation creating operational confusion without indicating specialized training. As darkness enveloped the warehouse complex, confusion spread through criminal ranks. Security coordinators struggled with failing systems. Leadership demanded explanation for communications breakdown. Operational discipline deteriorated as environmental control diminished. Julia's approach prioritized psychological impact over direct engagement, strategic uncertainty rather than tactical confrontation. The methodical disruption of operational infrastructure created cascading failure in criminal command structure, paranoia replacing coordination as systems failed without apparent cause. From secure observation position, Julia documented leadership response patterns, identifying key individuals through behavioral indicators, mapping authority hierarchy through crisis reaction, confirming intelligence assessments through real-time observation. The tactical processor that had once directed classified operations now executed domestic security intervention with calculated restraint. Each system failure appeared as environmental malfunction or equipment breakdown rather than deliberate sabotage, creating plausible deniability while maximizing operational disruption. At precisely 1:17, Julia initiated direct engagement phase. The warehouse's main distribution area housed 14 network members, including primary leadership, their security posture compromised by infrastructure failures and growing paranoia. The first direct contact came as calculated accident Julia, allowing controlled detection that appeared as environmental anomaly rather than tactical positioning. The resulting security response followed predictable patterns, drawing personnel from critical positions toward perceived threat while exposing organizational vulnerabilities. What followed appeared to security systems as chaotic confrontation between criminal elements, internal conflict rather than external intervention. Julia's movement through engagement zones utilized civilian explainable techniques rather than specialized combat methods, creating plausible deniability while achieving tactical objectives. The warehouse's poor lighting and compromised security systems prevented clear documentation of events, but the results proved undeniable. Within 27 minutes, 19 network members had been neutralized through non-lethal methods that left no evidence of specialized training. Environmental hazards, improvised deterrence, and fundamental leverage techniques rather than military combat procedures. 3 senior network leaders found themselves secured with commercial cable ties in compromising positions with their own illegal merchandise. Tableau designed for maximum law enforcement impact upon discovery. Digital storage devices containing operational records had been positioned for immediate identification, creating actionable intelligence package without revealing external intervention. Throughout the engagement, Julia maintained strict forensic discipline, no DNA transfer, no distinctive methodology, no evidence trail connecting to either civilian identity or military background. The operation would appear to investigators as internal network conflict rather than specialized intervention. As Julia completed final documentation of network assets, her tactical awareness registered approach signals vehicle movement patterns, indicating law enforcement rather than criminal reinforcement. The timing matched anonymous tip received through untraceable public phone 17 minutes earlier, creating plausible investigation catalyst without operational connection. Extraction followed pre-established protocols, departure routes avoiding camera coverage, movement patterns mimicking environmental interaction rather than tactical withdrawal. Transition to civilian appearance completed before reaching public observation zones. By 2:45, Julia had established position in 24-hour diner 5 miles from engagement zone civilian location, providing alibi presence while offering observation point for emergency response patterns. Local news channels displayed breaking coverage of major police operation at industrial complex, reporters speculating about significant criminal enterprise disruption, while law enforcement secured the area. The operational success exceeded tactical projections. 22 network members in custody, comprehensive evidence securing inevitable prosecution, civilian threat neutralized without collateral damage or identity compromise. The engagement represented optimal outcome within established parameters community. Protection achieved through controlled application of specialized skills without exposure of operational background. As Julia sipped coffee in the all-night diner, maintaining casual civilian demeanor while monitoring law enforcement response through media coverage, her tactical mind executed post-operation assessment. The successful intervention demonstrated effective integration of specialized training with civilian ethical framework, operational capability applied for community protection rather than governmental directive. Her phone displayed incoming message from Officer Chun. Interesting developments at abandoned industrial complex. Major criminal network apparently self-destructed through internal conflict. Convenient timing. The message contained recognition. Indicators without explicit acknowledgement, professional courtesy. Maintaining plausible deniability while conveying awareness of likely intervention. Julia's response maintained civilian communication patterns. Just saw on news. Good for the community if dangerous people are off streets. Chun's reply carried weighted subtext. Some capabilities translate well to civilian application when guided by ethical framework. Department grateful for anonymous tips regardless of source. The exchange confirmed Julia's assessment of Chun's background. The officer recognized specialized intervention indicators, but prioritized outcome over investigation. The professional courtesy suggested shared operational values, despite different current roles. 3 days later, local media reported unprecedented criminal prosecution. 22 individuals facing charges for organized criminal enterprise. Evidence described as extraordinarily comprehensive by District Attorney's Office. Law enforcement credited internal network conflict for the outcome. Though Officer Chun's quoted statement contained subtle acknowledgement, sometimes justice finds unexpected pathways when conventional methods face limitations. Julia monitored developments from new residents' tactical relocation, implemented as precautionary measure. Despite successful operational security, the apartment offered improved defensive positioning, multiple exfiltration options, and enhanced community awareness without sacrificing civilian appearance. The mall incident that had triggered operational reactivation now appeared in proper perspective, catalyst rather than compromise, opportunity rather than exposure. 7 years of suppressing specialized capabilities had provided necessary recovery. But current application demonstrated evolved purpose rather than regression to previous identity. 1 week after warehouse engagement, Julia received unexpected communication. Official police department envelope delivered through standard mail containing case closure notification for mall incident. Attached handwritten note from Officer Chun provided final confirmation of mutual understanding. Security footage from industrial complex shows similar technical anomalies to mall garage. Department closing both cases due to exceptional circumstances. Professional courtesy sometimes extends beyond institutional boundaries when shared values align. The message established closure parameters. Chun acknowledged intervention without requiring confirmation, established mutual non-disclosure understanding, and confirmed ethical alignment without compromising either professional position. Communication represented optimal resolution of potential security compromise. As Julia integrated this development into security assessment, deeper perspective emerged. The operational reactivation triggered by mall confrontation had revealed evolution rather than dormancy, specialized capabilities refined by civilian experience, tactical efficiency guided by personal ethical framework, operational independence replacing institutional directive. This integration created something beyond previous identity, neither wholly the Delta Force operator she had been nor the anonymous civilian she had pretended to be. The synthesis represented growth rather than regression, specialized skills, now applied with purpose derived from personal values rather than external command. 2 months after warehouse engagement, Julia's civilian life had established new equilibrium. Her personal training business expanded to include specialized, self-defense courses for women, curriculum designed to provide practical protection skills without revealing military methodology. The programs incorporated psychological preparation alongside physical techniques, focusing on situational awareness and predator deterrent strategies accessible to civilian practitioners. The training center attracted diverse clientele: professional women seeking personal security, survivors reclaiming confidence after traumatic experiences, mothers wanting to protect themselves and their families. Julia's instruction provided genuine security skills through civilian appropriate methods, creating community protection capability without compromising her operational background. Officer Chen occasionally attended sessions in civilian capacity, her participation representing both professional interest and tacit acknowledgement of shared mission parameters. Their interaction maintained formal boundaries while conveying mutual respect for different applications of similar capabilities. On rare occasions, anonymous intelligence reached Westridge Police Department regarding criminal operations threatening civilian safety. Information packages containing actionable evidence assembled through methods indicating specialized training, but delivered through untraceable channels. These submissions always focused on predatory threats targeting vulnerable populations, never involving political matters or institutional conflicts. The department's response remained consistent: professional utilization without source investigation, operational courtesy without official acknowledgement. This arrangement established functional partnership without institutional complications, community protection achieved through parallel efforts rather than formal cooperation. 6 months after warehouse engagement, Julia received communication that tested evolved identity integration. General Thomas Maxwell, former Delta Force commander and one of few individuals aware of circumstances surrounding her departure, reached out through secured channels requesting meeting. The contact triggered comprehensive security assessment. Maxwell's approach indicated personal rather than institutional outreach communication methods, prioritizing discretion over official protocol. His message referenced private conversation regarding historical misunderstandings rather than operational reactivation or formal proceedings. After thorough evaluation, Julia agreed to controlled meeting under specific security parameters, public location with multiple exfiltration options, advanced surveillance sweep, civilian appearance maintenance, and defined engagement limitations. The decision represented confidence in evolved identity rather than fear of past exposure, willingness to address history without surrendering current independence. They met at Lakeside Park outside Westridge city limits, the public setting, providing both witness coverage and conversation privacy. Maxwell had aged visibly since their last encounter: silver hair replacing military cut, civilian attire replacing uniform, but tactical awareness remaining evident in positioning and environmental scanning. "It's been a long time, Captain," Maxwell began, respecting her preference for bench seating that provided maximum situational awareness. "Julia is fine," she corrected gently. "That other identity served its purpose." Maxwell nodded, acknowledging the distinction without challenging its validity. "I've spent years tracking Blackwood's network. The corruption went deeper than anyone realized. 3 months ago, we finally secured definitive evidence of his treason. The information registered without emotional disruption, historical confirmation rather than current revelation. Julia had processed these events years earlier, their resolution representing closure rather than vindication. The record has been officially corrected," Maxwell continued. "Your name cleared, rank restored, full exoneration with appropriate compensation. The President has authorized your reinstatement at elevated rank with your choice of assignment." The offer hung between them, official redemption after years of exile, institutional validation of what she had always known. 7 years earlier, this moment would have represented everything she sought. Now it prompted thoughtful assessment rather than immediate acceptance. "I appreciate the gesture," Julia replied after measured consideration. "But I found different purpose that suits my current perspective." Maxwell studied her with analytical interest. "Recent events in Westridge suggest you haven't entirely abandoned operational capabilities. The warehouse intervention demonstrated textbook execution with evolved methodology. The observation contained no accusation, merely professional assessment from someone qualified to recognize specialized application." Julia maintained neutral expression while noting Maxwell's informed awareness of recent activities. "I've discovered that skills developed for one purpose can serve different missions when guided by personal ethics rather than institutional directives," she acknowledged without direct confirmation. Maxwell nodded with unexpected understanding. "That's precisely why I'm here. The official reinstatement is genuine, but my personal proposal is different. I've established specialized consulting group addressing domestic security threats through ethical intervention rather than institutional force operations focused on predatory threat neutralization without political entanglement." The proposal represented intriguing alignment, operational application, guided by ethical framework rather than governmental directive. Specialized capabilities serving community protection rather than national security abstraction. The concept mirrored Julia's evolved perspective while offering structural support beyond individual capacity. "The organization operates outside traditional command structures," Maxwell continued. "Independent funding, mission selection based on ethical parameters rather than political considerations, operational autonomy with collaborative support. Your recent activities in Westridge demonstrate exactly the evolved application we promote." Julia considered the proposal with tactical assessment rather than emotional response. The organization represented potential force multiplication for community protection objectives, operational support without institutional constraints, and ethical alignment without command hierarchy imposition. "I found value in independence," she noted, evaluating implications rather than rejecting outright. "Institutional frameworks tend to prioritize organizational interests over ethical considerations when conflicts arise." Maxwell acknowledged the concern without defensiveness. "That's why I left traditional service to establish this alternative. Each operator maintains complete mission selection authority, no directives, no requirements, no compromise of personal ethical framework." The concept represented evolution beyond both military structure and civilian limitations, specialized capabilities applied through independent judgment rather than external command, operational effectiveness without institutional compromise. The model aligned with Julia's current approach while offering enhanced resources and support network. "I'm not looking to return to who I was," she clarified, establishing fundamental parameters. "Neither am I," Maxwell replied with unexpected Candor. 7 years watching institutional priorities override ethical considerations forced reevaluation of how specialized capabilities should be applied. This organization represents that evolution skills, developed for national security, now focused on community protection without political distortion. The conversation continued with detailed exploration of operational philosophy, ethical framework, and practical methodology. Maxwell's proposal offered integration of Julia's evolved perspective within structural support that enhanced effectiveness without compromising independence. By conversation's end, Julia had reached calibrated decision-conditional engagement, maintaining operational autonomy while accessing support resources, collaboration without subordination, shared mission parameters without command hierarchy. The arrangement represented optimal integration of specialized capabilities with evolved ethical framework. As they concluded their meeting, Maxwell offered final observation that captured the transformation both had experienced. The skills never change, but their purpose can evolve. What once served institutional directives can protect communities when guided by personal ethics rather than political expedience. The insight resonated with Julia's journey from military operator to civilian protector's specialized capabilities, finding renewed purpose through ethical application rather than institutional direction. The ghost of Westridge Mall had evolved into something more integrated than either previous. Identity capabilities serving community rather than government. Skills applied through personal values rather than external command. In the months that followed, Julia maintained her civilian life while selectively engaging with Maxwell's organization, providing specialized expertise for community protection operations, sharing tactical innovations developed through independent application, and accessing support resources that enhanced effectiveness without compromising autonomy. Her training center expanded to multiple locations, providing genuine security skills to vulnerable populations through civilian appropriate methodology. The curriculum developed through operational experience and refined through civilian application created protection capabilities accessible without specialized background. Occasional anonymous intelligence packages continued reaching Westridge Police Department, maintaining unofficial partnership with law enforcement through parallel effort rather than formal cooperation. Officer Chun's professional courtesy remained consistent operational respect without official acknowledgement, mutual recognition without institutional complication. The mall incident that had triggered operational reactivation now appeared as pivotal transition rather than security compromise, catalyst for evolution rather than regression to previous identity. The confrontation had initiated integration process that created something beyond either former self-specialized capabilities guided by civilian ethics, tactical efficiency applied for community protection. As Julia completed morning training session with group of women learning fundamental self-defense techniques, she recognized the transformative journey from military operator to civilian protector. The skills remained unchanged, but their purpose had evolved from national security abstraction to direct community protection. This evolution represented growth rather than compromise capabilities, finding meaningful application through personal ethical framework rather than institutional directive. The ghost of Westridge Mall had discovered that true strength came not from specialized training alone, but from applying those capabilities with clear ethical purpose and personal accountability. The transformation offered lesson beyond tactical application, the understanding that skills developed for one purpose could serve greater mission when guided by evolved perspective and independent judgment. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.